coming up.
Yeah, if you're trying to make $1 million film, it's easier to do it in America than it is to do it in Europe, in my opinion. The independent film industry, and at least from a financing standpoint, is alive and well in the US.
Demystified is a production of StudioFest. If you're ready to make a micro-budget feature, submit your film or screenplay now at filmfreeway.com/StudioFest. This episode of Demystified is brought to you by Armor Lock. This series exists in both video and podcast form and is designed to be experienced either way. You can find the video version at moviemaker.com or the audio version wherever you get your podcasts. From StudioFest and Movie Maker magazine, this is Demystified, a series about an innovative new way to make movies and what it really takes to make an indie feature film. My name's Jake Bowen, and this series is about shedding light on the parts of getting an indie film made that are never seen and rarely talked about, through the lens of StudioFest, a one-of-a-kind annual film festival that awards up-and-coming writers and directors the chance to make a feature film. In our conversation with Jim Cummings a couple months ago, we asked him if there was anyone he recommended we talk to next.
I hate to say it, I love talking to Mike Covino, who made The Climb, because he was a producer for years as well and also did the self-distribution thing. And every single time I talk to him, he's like, I want nothing to do with it. He's like, I want to make the artwork, I want to write the artwork, and I want to sell it to somebody else, and they're going to do all that shit. And it's like so different from what my life is like. Yeah, he'd be a good person to talk to play devil's advocate for sure.
It happens that Michael Covino and his filmmaking partner Kyle Marvin are in the middle of promoting the release of their award-winning feature, The Climb.
Mike, I'm getting married. How awesome is that?
Awesome.
She loves me for who I am. And I love her for who she is. I can't wait to spend the rest of my life with her.
Kyle, I slept with her.
What?
You can see The Climb in select theaters right now. Mike and Kyle sat down to talk to us about their experiences going from...
Sorry, guys.
Is that your ringtone?
That is absolutely insane. That might happen again, and I'm hoping it doesn't. I don't know how to unplug it. How do you... I'm going to unplug it.
Here's our conversation with Michael Covino and Kyle Marvin, creators and stars of The Climb.
You know, we really enjoyed the film. We'd like to just talk first about your experience making it.
Yeah, absolutely. We enjoy the film too. It's been a fun, constantly surprising ride making this film for the last 3 years.
Yeah, it's been strange because it was such a fast process from the inception of it into production, and then from production, literally from the final sound mix directly on a plane to Cannes, and then it launched at Cannes, and then it sort of hit all the festivals back to back, and it was like this whirlwind ride. And then March 20th, we're going to be in every theater. It's going to be everywhere. And then all of a sudden, just the stop at that point.
It was the record scratch moment.
Yeah, it was the record scratch moment.
If you're watching this from the future, they're referring to the moment the COVID pandemic hit and landed right at the start of their original theatrical release.
But the making the film was really fun.
Yeah,
that's what we were supposed to talk about.
I got it. Yeah, we're talking about making films.
So the original idea came to me on a long bike ride while I was contemplating what it means when one of your good friends and your ex-girlfriend sleep together. And I thought that there was humor to mine in that, and came up with this really simple idea of a friend revealing this information on a bike ride while the other friend is out of shape and can't catch him. And, share it with Kyle, and he was like, yeah, it's great. And we just sort of flushed it out as a very simple scene to start. And we would just rehearse the scene and we would play with it. And we knew that there was something in this dynamic between two characters.
If I catch you, I'm gonna kill you.
I know, that's why I waited for the hill. Hey, switch gears. You need to pedal at a higher cadence.
Fuck you.
We shot the scene as a short, and immediately we're like, what else could these characters do? And sort of loosely flushed out, okay, if this were to be a feature, kind of how would we map it out and where would it go? And we realized we would shoot it in a bit more of an elliptical style. And then we just submitted this short to Sundance and in a lot of ways forgot about it, because that's the best way to process rejection is to just like
pretend you didn't do it.
Yeah, to just be like, okay, that's fine. It won't get in like all the other films I've submitted to Sundance. And it got in, and then we went, oh boy, okay, so we really need to make sure we have all our ducks in a row with the idea for what the feature actually is, because going to Sundance with the short, we knew there'd be an opportunity to talk about like what we wanted to do next, and we had produced some movies, so we understood how there's a really clean way to translate a short into a feature, just based on like financiers can wrap their heads around it easier, because it's like, oh yeah, you're just going to do that, but for 90 minutes.
And we had already sort of figured out the idea was really to have large leaps in time occur so that you could really experience the friendship and the effects of all these decisions, but played out over like longer gaps in between, so you really like feel the distance and the amount of space between all the things. Yeah. So we had mapped out almost what the final film became.
We just had all the scenes laid out. We knew what happened in the scenes, and then it was just a question of like writing the scene.
So when we went to Sundance, we took those blocks and we just made a deck basically. That and the short was what we had at Sundance to say, like, trust us, this is the future version of this particular idea. And we ended up spending most of that Sundance pitching people and not as much time as we should have enjoying what a moment. We enjoyed the moment, but I think we spent a lot of time being really proactive in terms of like presenting what this idea could be. And we found a good partner there. With Topic. And they were really of the mindset to just jump right in. Like they were interested in moving as fast as we could. And originally the idea was pretty naive of us to be like, well, I wonder if we could have the feature done in time for the following Sundance. So have the short done in one, have the feature ready in the next.
The original plan was really work with the financiers in whatever sort of timeline they wanted to put us on within reason. And so we didn't want to say no to the idea of being fast-tracked with the movie, because like they could always change their mind and then we have no money. So we shot 80% of the film in 6 weeks, and then we waited to shoot the last 20% in the winter months is basically what we did. And then it timed up perfectly with a Cannes submission. So we finished shooting the film, and then we already cut the majority of the film. We were sitting with 80% of the cut. We could watch it. It informed in some ways what we shot or how we adjusted the scenes, the winter scenes. And then we shot and finished those up. Took about 3 to 4 weeks to finish cutting the film and then submit it to Cannes.
Oh, I'm really curious if when you were talking with potential financiers, like, did you have to think about like cameo roles of people or like just sort of the producer stuff that comes up with getting them to unlock the money?
Yeah, I mean, we were making with a financier that wasn't in any way making anything contingent upon, we weren't pre-selling foreign. I mean, we actually did end up selling foreign, but that was before the festival, after we made the film. But nothing was contingent upon anything other than like, hey, let's try to get some interesting, recognizable actors in some of these roles to fill out this cast. But it was always from the point of view of who would be the best actor for the role. We have George Wendt in the film. George is a brilliant actor. I don't know if he has any particular like foreign value or anything like that. So like there was no unlocking of anything. We knew we were making the film we were making. The financier was on board with taking that gamble. And, certainly with us in the two lead roles, which, we certainly didn't bring any value to the table other than they had confidence in the chemistry we would have on screen. So,
I mean, we've been in the position of that unlocking. I mean, we've been in the position of having those conversations in other projects. So it's something we're definitely attuned to and have had to deal with. But for this one, because we were the two lead actors and because a lot of the basis of the film relied on the dynamic between these two people, well-known actors probably would have added value to the film, but it could have also potentially spoiled the dynamic. And we talked about it early on as like, okay, yeah, what would that look like with someone else? And I think it just us felt more natural. And also, to be honest, it was selfish because no one was casting us in anything. So it's handy to be able to sort of put yourself in something.
Well, it was never an option. We were never presenting it as, hey, maybe we'll cast someone else. Like we would humor it or entertain it, but we decided to make the movie with Topic because they wanted to make the movie with us in the lead. It was a pretty easy conversation.
And really the challenge of it was just convincing them to take the lead.
With that producer mindset, I'm curious, like, what sort of things as producers you're keeping in mind when you're making this in order to put you in the best position to succeed?
I think as we wrote the film, we wrote it in a way we thought we could manage. We scheduled the film in a way that I thought from a producerial standpoint would give us the best results. So, for instance, like every scene in the film had a full rehearsal day. So we say 30 initial shoot days. it's really like 15 initial shoot days with a full rehearsal day with cast and crew. So we'd run through the 8-minute scene, and then we would start shooting takes by the end of the day, and then we would review the footage and we would look at it and we would make adjustments. And then the following day we would come back in, and that's when we would be going for it with performance. And so I think that was definitely a product of experiences that we had both had on films where we would run a tight like 18-day, 6-day week shoot for 3 weeks or something. And we'd be marching through days, but we would find ourselves like having to move on at a moment where maybe the actors were uncovering something or finding something magical, and we just didn't have enough time to like let the scene evolve or let the moment evolve. So the constraints that we put on it, that we wanted to shoot these long continuous takes from a producing standpoint, really benefited us because the process became extremely different. It was just way more methodical and thought out and planned.
Yeah, and I think also we leaned on locations a lot and spending a lot of time up front defining those locations. We spent a lot of time and energy finding those places, going out and visiting them. A lot of that pre-production work, I think, helped a lot in terms of the fact when we got to the point, even in pre-production with department heads, by the time we went out to the location, we were pretty confident, hey, this is the place we like in this location, and this is how we wrote it with such specificity in terms of camera motions and things, specific things in mind, like the house and how the camera travels around and in and out and what the house geography looked like was in the script. Like understanding from the very outset what the execution of this script was going to be and how it was going to be seen in the film of it, I think helped a lot in terms of the efficiency we did, saving time and money.
Could you talk a little bit about your sort of journey from young, aspiring filmmakers in your early 20s to getting into producing films, maybe with an eye toward eventually directing, or what people who are watching this could take away that are also trying to make their own, the climb someday?
Well, I think, for me, it was always an eye toward directing, but I was always like wanting to direct, and I was directing certainly, but it was directing a lot of things that people hadn't seen, or shorts that I either never released or I did release, but they played at, some small festival. Kyle came in from a different way. He was sort of working in advertising first, and then we met on a commercial shoot, and I was just an actor on the shoot. He hired me, and then eventually we started working together on commercials. But the game was sort of like, how do you pay your bills and survive with cameras? And I think that's sort of like what a lot of people who are reading or watching this or looking for advice on film stuff are looking for and are doing, is like, okay, how do I just survive and make enough money to do something even adjacent to this? And so I think that's always been the game, is like everyone needs to find like their racket. And we found different rackets and then ended up starting a commercial production company that became the same racket. And I say racket just because like you have to charge enough to be able to not spend all your time on it. So it's like you charge enough to where you can block off 5 days a month, or
put aside money for a short,
or a week a month, or put aside enough money to shoot a short, or put aside enough money to shoot a teaser for a feature that, like we shot this feature, Keep in Touch, that I wrote with our other partner in our commercial company, Sam. We shot that just with money that we had tucked away from making a bunch of commercials. And then that teaser became like the thing that we sold to go raise the money to make that feature, which was more or less our first real feature. We just always kept focused on like, okay, all we want to do is make movies, but that's a big leap of faith to just say, I'm going to go make films right now. And you kind of have to like put aside enough money to go make your first film and deplete all your reserves to where you're like broke again, because you're probably not going to get paid on your first film. So there's also a weird balance.
Yeah, there's also a thing that's sort of a mythology that I think we all know, but we should talk about more, which is this idea that like, you sit down in front of your computer for the first time, and then you like type a perfect script, and then that perfect script gets Tom Cruise, and then you did it. The reality of it is we've both written probably a dozen scripts. Most of them were probably pretty bad. So I think like...
No, some of them were good.
All right, some of them were great. The point being like, even if it is a master script, I think this idea that we're precious and hold on to things that are sort of stagnating is a bit of a dangerous game. And sometimes those things just need to be packaged up and put on the shelf. And then when Westerns are all of a sudden really cool, you can just dust it off and be like, I told you guys, even though they were saying no one wants to make a Western anymore, which they were saying last year. He's really.
ready to go.
We're just selling westerns right now, just as a heads up. But I think
all I want to make is a western.
But I think, I mean, you were just in a western, so I don't know what he's talking about.
It comes out next week.
Yeah, he's in the Tom Hanks movie, News of the World, which comes out next week.
Word is she's that captive out of Wichita Falls.
What do you want?
How much you want for her?
This child is not for sale.
But I think there's something to that mindset of, I should have and could have been continuing to work just to do the actual legwork. And that was true for us with camera stuff. We continued to shoot on cameras, try new things. And luckily commercials gave us the ability to play with toys, play with cranes, play with dolly track, try new things, get our hands dirty in every department. And it helped us really as producers because we could do something at a very cheap cost, but also there's commercials that cost $1 million. So you got to play with every way to spend the budget. So I think that really benefited us on the producing standpoint from just being comfortable with understanding how to make things.
I just have to say, I really appreciate the practical outlook to becoming a professional creator. Don't put it to chance, just start doing. And then I really also like how it sounds like you've systematized the proof of concept where you are pumping out concepts and then letting them exist and seeing if something bites.
Yeah, totally. I mean, there was a world in which the client didn't make it into Sundance and only my mom saw it, and then we went on to the next one.
I mean, there have been a lot of decliners before that didn't make it into Sundance and no one saw it. But what you were just saying, which I thought was interesting, is this idea that what I've found so fascinating in the last year and a half, where now all of a sudden we're in demand in a way, or we have opportunities that we never had before, and we have people offering us things, and we have an idea, and now someone's paying us to write it, which is like a new concept, right? Or someone is bringing us to an idea, or someone's bringing us a thing to direct. And what's interesting now is we're growing so much as writers specifically, or as producers, or just in every capacity. We're growing because of the sheer volume. We're writing every day, and we're writing 5 scripts this year, and it's that sheer volume, we're just growing and evolving as writers. And I'm I'm not the same writer I was when I wrote The Climb. I'm way more evolved. I have a way better understanding of this craft. And so I think it's almost like figuring out how to get to that level of just not being precious before you are there is really helpful, because it's just a numbers game. It's just it's the same thing as if you're a basketball player. You just have to sit in front of a free throw line and keep shooting over and over again. And eventually you'll just make 8 out of 10, 9 out of 10. Eventually your percentage just goes up.
Right.
So it's sort of the same with throwing things at the wall with scripts. It's you're going to find your voice just by writing some really bad scripts, or writing some scripts that you just put on a shelf and move on from. But it's it's about that discipline of figuring out how to, even though you have a job that you do 5 days a week, the sad thing about film is that it has to be a passion, and it has to be your off time becomes that, right? So you don't get vacations, you don't get another hobby, all my friends who work in finance or other industries, they have hobbies and vacations. And for the last 10, 12 years, I've just had scripts that I was writing on the side. So it's it's a Saturday night, I guess I'm going to work on my script because now I have time to. And it's just a different way of looking at the world and thinking about it, because it's your off time becomes your passion until finally that becomes your job. And then you have to figure out how to set boundaries.
Yeah, and I think just speaking from the writing side of things, there's a fundamentals time of your life where you're trying to technically do the right thing. You're learning these really specific rules, and then eventually you get to a point where you know those rules innately and you're just sort of doing it, and then you can get to a point where you just throw the rules out and you do whatever you want and you're Charlie Kaufman. You know what I'm saying? There's an evolution of that skill set, but it really requires those first 2 before you can become Paul Thomas Anderson. You have to do that pre-steps that we forget about that aspect of it.
Yeah, I heard a great quote is don't let perfection be the enemy of progress. And,
I'm going to write that down. He's literally writing it down.
What was it? Don't let perfection be the enemy of progress. Who said that? Do you know?
Duplass brother quote, actually.
Oh, even better. I'm going to put it in my book of Duplass brothers quotes.
For the record, it's actually a riff on an Italian proverb popularized by Voltaire, usually translated from French as "perfect is the enemy of good." Anyway, more after the break. Speaking of the Duplass brothers, I bring up the Mark Duplass South by speech that inspired these conversations. That sort of fairy tale version of things where you graduate film school and you write up a beautiful script, it somehow makes its way onto the producer's desk at the big studio and they throw $1 million at you to make your first feature, you know?
And I know a couple people who had that experience. Kind of, it just was like, here you go. And I was like, wow, that was easy. And I don't envy them because like, it's not always going to be that way. And some of them, I see them hit ruts. And I see them struggle with the second, third, fourth films, or just in general. I got into producing because I couldn't find anyone who wanted to make my movies, right? I was like, oh, no one wants to produce a movie for me, and I can't do all the things. So I guess I'll produce things for other people who I think are talented, and then eventually maybe I'll get to a place where I can carve off time and go direct my stuff again. You know, there's something about approaching a career in the film industry from like a point of view of taking responsibility for all of it. Some people can just be directors and they have a producer that they trust and they'll handle all that stuff. I don't even know how to wrap my head around the idea of being an actor who goes on auditions and just does that, because it's so daunting to me. Like, it's why I didn't do it. My first love was acting, but I was like, I can't do that. I was like, I don't know how I would get through the day. I have to be proactive and I have to go make things because that's the only way I'll know I have a shot at doing it, you know?
That has come up a bunch of times too. It's one of these things that keeps emerging where people kind of go, I'm just going to go make the thing that I'll be in, and then I'm kind of controlling my own destiny. So.
It's such a funny thing because the arts are a subjective thing. And so like you could write a script that's a masterpiece and take it to 150 people who are like, I don't get it. And so it's such a tricky thing to keep your internal engine warm. You know what I'm saying? And that mostly comes from people around you who sort of operate on the same gas, you know what I'm saying? So that you constantly have a dynamic of people in your vicinity who are either doing something that's like in the same universe as you, so you can watch it and you go, wow, that's fucking great. That tastes really good. Or you guys are talking about it with each other. Sorry, way too many analogies. Or you talk about it.
I don't even know where to find the thing. You're just analogy to analogy.
It's like, wait, someone's eating gasoline at this point. But the point really is surrounding yourself with people that are doing tonally or artistically similar things, so that you can keep a fire going. Because I think if you're by yourself on an island, it can be very empowering. Sorry, I'll just quit at a certain point on the analogies. But like if you're by yourself, it can be really empowering because you feel liberated to say anything or do anything you want. But at a certain point, you're going to have to show other people. And if you're just saying like, this is me by myself, and then no one gets it, it can be pretty hard. You know what I'm saying? So I think finding that group is a really important step.
Yeah, that's actually like a huge element, I think, that we're coming to, that the cavalry is not coming. So you want to create your own cavalry. And a part of that is forming your collective, forming your team, not only from a creative standpoint to make the work better, but even also from a financial and investor and risk mitigation standpoint. The more people, the more brains, the more trust there is in your group, the better shot you have.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's like, for sure, you have to find collaborators that you are inspired by. Like Kyle and I partnered up because we have a shared work ethic. We also creatively find common ground, like we creatively align, but we have different tastes, but we have a shared work ethic. Like he works really hard and I tend to work really hard. And so leaning on each other becomes easy because there's this understanding that, oh yeah, like I can trust this person. He's going to do his end of the bargain.
That's important.
All it really is like we're all just wandering around in the dark a little bit, and we're just taking whatever avenues we can that are in front of us and making a best judgment call as to whether or not it's a good idea or bad idea. Like we had other opportunities for financing on the climb, and we just were like, it doesn't feel right. So we went with this other, direction with Topic, and it ended up being a great fit, but it could have not been a great fit, right? That's sort of the game. And then it's like trusting your instincts on certain things and trying to, I don't know. It's weird because like I think about it now and I'm like, I was the same director, meaning I had the same capabilities and talent and skill set before I made this little short film that all of a sudden got a stamp of approval from Sundance. And then everyone was willing to like have conversations with me and do all this stuff. Whereas like I was trying to make films for the last 8 years. I tried to finance films that I was going to direct and just constantly hit walls. So you get a sense of what's real and what's not real from that. And you can understand that like it's a lot of it is about being able to decipher for yourself, having confidence to a degree where you need to, where you're like, I know I can do this. I know I'm capable. I know I have talent, and I don't need this validation, but the validation will help streamline the process. So let's go get the validation, or let's go do the thing, just so that I can not have to bang my head against the wall trying to raise money for this movie. I can just get a laurel, put it on my short, and then the process will be easier, you know?
And to feed into the sort of Duplassian philosophy of that South by Southwest speech, I think that the place where independent cinema can really come back in a really powerful way in this new world that we're coming into is to have people in the independent film space who can make movies, who can take money in and convert that money into images on a screen put together in a way with music behind it that stands as a completed piece of work. And I think the more that our community can support each other and create pods of people who can do that function, the more we as an independent cinema will encroach back upon the studio system, who are now getting stuck higher and higher up in the cost of their films. And I think if we can orient our community around not just great ideas, because I can't tell you the amount of times that me and probably all of you and probably everyone watching hasn't had an uncle at a holiday get together be like, I got a great idea for a movie. A woman, walks into a room.
Great idea.
Sorry. Get it. But having a person say that thing to you and be like, that's a great movie. And then you're like, yeah, but that's not a great movie. You told me 3 sentences. To make it a great movie requires me to sit down, write 120 pages of script, and then do all these other steps. So I think that the more we as a community can not just say, like, I got a great idea and a great pitch, the more we can say, how do we take those ideas, form them into whole things, create a community of people who can take cash in from anybody? Because I guarantee you there's a dentist in Oklahoma who's got $1 million who, if you got a great thing, you could probably get it out of them. So the trick is just translating, being able to take that process and do it. The more we can do it, the better.
Ramble. What's going on with you today? I'm feeling it. I can tell what type of mood Kyle's in based on how many sentences it takes him to say the same idea. Like, look, we love each other, don't get me wrong, but it is definitely like we've been together for a long time on this press tour. And I am at my end. No, I'm sitting.
It's funny. I feel like I'm watching like outtakes from the movie right now.
I'm like, he said something really poignant, and I'm just like, yeah, I heard that.
I don't want to ask about what Jim Cummings said to us. He's like really into this whole like taking the power back and like, we've got to make our margins and stuff. Like we've got to self-distribute. Like that's the way we should be doing this. But I just wonder what you think of that. Like, because you went a more traditional route. Like you think that like self-distribution is the future, or like? I
mean, I've talked to Jim about this a lot. I'm like, power to you, man. You want to do that? Go right ahead. I don't want to be on Twitter. I don't want to be on Instagram. I don't want to be on Facebook. I don't want to market my own film. I don't want to sell it. I want to talk about it for sure, but like I just personally have no interest in being in advertising anymore. And like, if you want to sell a film, then you have to be in advertising, right? You have to be in marketing. You are now a marketing person. It's just a different job for me. And so like, I'm looking at it like, how many hours do I have in a day? And what would I rather spend my time doing? Figuring out how to self-distribute my movie and like really get it out to audiences in a real way, or just write my next film? There's people who love marketing. And so like, if we can work with a marketing team that's flexible and collaborate with us to make sure that like the integrity of the film we're making is being communicated to an audience, then great. And there's a lot of companies out there doing it. So like,
they're not mutually exclusive, I think is the thing. I think there's a place for the Jim Cummings model. And I think there's even films we could do where we have some big, social media celebrities involved, and for them to tweet to 14 million people, it takes little to no effort. So I think that there's...
But I would still want to hire someone to do the theater booking. You're still going to hire someone to create posters and the assets and the trailer and all these things. Like, I don't want to cut my own trailer. Not really. Like, I've done that before. Like, I would much rather hire a killer trailer editor because like that's an art form in its own right. As much as I think like my artistic version of the Climb trailer is going to work, if the movie's going to go out and it's going to like get 65-year-old women in Lincoln Center to go into a theater, it's going to be because of the trailer that Sony Classics cut for my movie. It's not going to be because of the thing that I would have created. I'm aware of that. I'm aware of the discrepancy between that. There's also like things that we can add to the marketing campaign, which Sony allowed us to do, which was really amazing and beneficial. So I don't know. Jim's right in that you have control over what dollars are spent and what dollars you sit behind, which in our instance was not a concern because we sold the film for a minimum guarantee of more than we made the film. So we were sort of like, if we make $20 million at the box office, great, we start making more money. But otherwise, let's just go have fun with the release and try to make a splash.
Yeah, and I think that's probably an important point, is that some of what Jim is talking about, or the people he's talking to, are people who are in a situation where their only two options are basically do that stuff, some of that stuff myself, or just don't make my movie, And so in that case, it's like, he's trying to be an evangelist.
He's absolutely right that if you're looking at a no MG offer or like a $50,000 MG offer from, I could name a number of companies that give those offers, but like Gravitas comes to mind. They're a great company. No, I'm not saying anything bad, but like, Gravitas is going to take your film out and not give you any money up front, or give you a small amount of money up front. They've got great relationships with iTunes and Amazon, and they can put it and they can make sure it's the front page or whatever. But so can you, and so can these really small boutique companies that'll charge just like, you could literally just pay them an amount of money, and then you can do the marketing yourself, and you can spend the money where you see useful, and you can hire a theater booker, and you can hire a publicist who will make sure that you get reviewed in the right markets. All that stuff is very real, but you're going to be spending more money, or you're going to be making that your new job, and you're not going to be making your next film.
Yeah, I mean, the reality of it is, and we've done it too for films, is like we've managed social accounts and done those things, and it is fucking exhausting. And you're like, I sold like 6 tickets, and I think it's true amongst other filmmakers. We've talked to other people about it, and they're like, don't even do it.
That's why I would never do a Kickstarter campaign, ever. Like I was like, I'd rather not make my movie than do a Kickstarter campaign. And I know that sounds selfish, but it's because like I don't want to have to do fulfillments. Like I'm not doing T-shirt fulfillments, and I'm not being a snob. I do not have the bandwidth. I can't. That's a full-time thing, and you're either going to let people down by not doing the thing right, or you have an assistant or an intern who's going to do it all. But like we didn't certainly have that at the time, and like I was like, I'm not about to go shoot a Kickstarter campaign and then promise people a bunch of stuff that I have to deliver then. For us personally, like, and it's just a personal thing. Like, it was just like, I'd rather just go the traditional route and bang my head against the wall until someone will open a door. But like, I don't want to, it's not to say people shouldn't do that. Like, if you don't
there's a pathway. Yeah, there's
definitely a pathway for that. And people should do that. I just think for us, like, I think I just burnt out. I burnt out on doing
on that, or in that. Are you familiar with Wefunder at all? It's like Kickstarter, except instead of fulfillments, you're giving equity in that.
So I've been talking about this for the last 8 years, as whoever comes up with this idea will be a genius. So I'm glad it finally happened. Did they fix something with the SEC where that's allowed now?
Jobs Act.
The Jobs Act, yeah.
Okay, so
wow. Sorry, they did it.
This is what happens if you make a film and you don't read the news.
Right. but that is a really interesting thing, because it is sort of what Kickstarter was promising in this sort of ethereal sense.
So that sounds like a great idea. I would do that. It's a very clear exchange. It's like you're spending money, you are a shareholder in this potentially not profitable entity.
Right, but you love it to the extent of your 0.02% ownership.
Jim has been using it. People that have any sort of credentials have the capability to get hundreds of thousands of dollars in support for their movies.
Well, it's really cool.
Yeah, that sounds awesome. I'm so into that idea. If you want to spend $5,000 on a movie, you own $5,000 worth of the movie. It's like
obviously, Mike and Kyle support Jim Cummings' DIY attitude. I think they're just saying that the existing structures for financing and distribution are still viable and even preferable options for certain kinds of films.
Right? Like, we're talking about scale. There are certain stories, there are certain ideas that require scale, right? Okay, now I want to do this. It's like, well, that's going to cost $20 million. And so all of a sudden, it's like you're not self-distributing anymore. You have to figure out how to harness the systems that are already in place and the studio apparatus, and figure out how to use it best to your advantage and navigate that, and figure out, like, cool, there is a whole marketing department over here, and I need to figure out how to get those two people to do what I want for this film, because I know it'll be the best, while navigating their personalities and their wants and needs, and the fact that they don't want to get fired. That's just a whole other thing that is part of being a filmmaker and taking an idea from inception to release. And there's something really pure and beautiful about just making a film and releasing it yourself, which I like. Probably if this was 8 years ago, I would be all in, and Jim and I would be speaking the exact same language. I just don't want to market my own film.
It's also, he's right about the price point. The price point is really the determining factor. And I think our industry goes through different waves when, Red camera comes out, or like these new tiny DSLRs that shoot 4K come out. And it's like, oh, my cousin just shot, and keep going out to my family, just shot like this wedding video and it looks amazing. And he did it for $2,000. So you just do that times 10 and you got a movie, it's $20,000. Yes, that happens. And yes, there are movies that can work at that level, but there are just costs that occur when you're making a movie. As lean as you want to make it, at a certain point, or you do want to scale up and say, no, you get paid what you need.
You want to make it sustainable.
Right, you get paid what you need and maybe there's a mix of it. So it's like, hey, this movie's great and we'll all make money. And then I want to do this one where it's just the three of us. You know what I'm saying? So I think that it has to do a lot with the scale of the movie you're doing. And I think there's caps on, sometimes you want to just jump into the infrastructure that's already there and utilize that to your best advantage.
And truly, like, the profoundness of the puffy chair, like that film's great. But like, we are so oversaturated with there's just so many movies. There's so many people making high quality movies that are poignant, that have point of view, that have a voice, that have great performances that we've never heard before. And yet we don't hear about them. We don't see them. I'm not saying the time is gone. I'm saying that, like, one of the things that we were really conscious about when we were making this is, like, we're not making this if it's going to blend in. Like, we can't make The Climb if it's going to just blend into everything that's come before. And we've been really lucky in that, like, we've just gone to a lot of festivals over the last 8-9 years and watched everything. And so we're like sort of understanding the landscape of independent film in America, at least, and knowing what we wanted to make and what we didn't want to make, because we don't want to make the same thing that we've seen before. And how can we take what we love from films of this generation and this country and this period and sort of imbue them with that sensibility while also telling a relevant current story that we can both star in, and that was sort of the formula for us, if there was a formula.
I'm also curious, because this has just been coming up for us personally. I keep hearing a lot about doing like co-productions with like European companies. It can be difficult in the States, at least. And I did notice that, like, I think you shot some in France in this, and I don't know if that was like we want to have a little bit of French appeal, but have you thought about that, or has that come up for you guys at all?
It wasn't a French co-production. Like, we didn't get any money from France, but we definitely wanted to shoot 30 minutes from Cannes in the off chance that the person watching it has ridden that road before or something. I don't know. I mean, truly, like, the idea, the inception of the idea all came and stemmed from sort of this romanticism of French culture and cycling and music and those films. And so it just felt very fitting to the story. And then I was in Cannes the year before, and I just rode my bike around, like, scouting locations, and I happened to stumble upon that road, and I was like, this is the road. And our producer had worked with this company, Ad Astra, who's based in Nice, and they're down there, and they're a production services company, and they're great. And it just became very serendipitous.
But in terms of the world of the co-financing, I mean, I think it's a great option. I think accessing the way that Europe does their movie financing can be very beneficial for artistic choices or artistic freedom. And that's great to sort of disembody the financing from the American sense of, like, is this going to make my money back? But I do think that it boils back again to this idea that, like, if you are coming from a place where you're like, I really believe in this and I can make it, I think you can access money. I think there's money to be had in America for those films. I don't think it's contingent on having to go to Europe to find people willing to take a risk on film.
If you're trying to make $1 million film, it's easier to do it in America than it is to do it in Europe, in my opinion, because, I mean, maybe I'm wrong. I could be, this is a totally subjective point of view. So there will be 1,000 people who would disagree with me, but, like, those government bodies that finance films in Europe, the same filmmakers who keep taking all that money have a new film each year. So, like, if you're an up-and-coming filmmaker, French filmmaker, you're competing with Jacques Audiard. Maybe not competing, but, like, there's money that's being allocated to certain filmmakers every year. And I don't know how that translates or how that works. You'd have to ask sort of filmmakers from those countries. But I will say that, like, in America, there's just this whole industry of crazy people who want to throw money at movies. There doesn't seem to be a shortage. And it's just about, like, spending a lot of time meeting people and then meeting other people and then meeting other people and spending years and years and years having coffee with people and figuring out if you have a shared sensibility, and then eventually they connect you with someone, and then a project aligns. But the independent film industry, and at least from a financing standpoint, is alive and well in the U.S. Like,
the funny thing is that I think the thing that, at least in my experience with the European filmmakers who we've hung out with and talked to, that they have really right is they have the most patient mindset of all people. Like, you'll talk to them and they're like, yeah, I'm working on my movie. And you're like, when do you think I'll be ready? And they're like, 5 years. You know what I'm saying? And in America, it's like, well, you have something in the next like 3 months. What the fuck is happening? You know what I'm saying? And I think if we can learn anything from the Europeans, it's like, hey, it might take some time. Just keep at it and try and find a way to keep at it for that amount of time, and you'll get there.
It's actually a pretty hopeful, it's kind of a hopeful message in some ways compared to the sort of Jim kind of called it, like depression porn pornography of like, everything is so terrible. There's no way to make movies. So you just got to go do it yourself. And that's inspiring in a certain way, but it's also kind of nice to hear, I think it's alive and well and there's money out there.
Yeah, so you're doing it yourself. It's just like, look, we don't have the keys to the kingdom. Like all we did was we just went to parties. Like it's not parties. You show up at Sundance and you sneak into parties, and then you show up at Cannes and you sneak into parties. And you like all my vacations for the last 10 years have been going to film festivals. Like I would save up my money. I'd be like, cool, let me go stay in a wine cellar in Cannes and just watch movies, and then sneak into a couple parties, and then you come away, and the next thing you know, like 4 years down the road, you run into this person that you met there, and they're running some company. And you're like, oh, what do you do now? And they're like, oh, I do this. I'm like, oh, cool.
We would go to Sundance and climb through the like snowbanks
into parties,
into the back of parties. And then you walk into the party and just be snow from like our hips down. We just some people are like, well, who are you? And we're like, hey, no, we're here. We're part of the party.
Yeah, it's just, you know what it is, truly, it's just like being playful about it. Like it's never thinking that that we have the answers, and we could have this conversation and I might be self-distributing my next movie for all I know. I just don't know, but we'll cross that bridge when we get there. I think it's about like not trying to be what's the word that they use in tech? Like when you're a disruptor. Like, I don't have the gall to assume that I can disrupt it yet. I just know that like I'll fix what I can fix in front of me, and sure, and like share the information with other people, but the industry isn't fully broken. Like there's still great films being made, right? There's still great distribution companies doing
theaters in small towns in every city in America,
and marketing films in really interesting ways. You know what I mean? Like Parasite won Best Picture last year. Like let's all acknowledge that like that was the best film of the year in any country, and it won Best Picture at the Oscars. So like something's working, and Neon did that, right? Like Neon bought that film before it even came out. It won the Palme d'Or, and then they went on and they ran a killer campaign, and everyone's just aware enough, and it was at the right time, and they won Best Picture, if that's any indication of like where we're at as a film society. So yeah, like things are not dead, it's just it's shifting, and like I don't know.
But what you guys
I think there's going to be a resurgence of theaters. If like I see the Warner Bros. Announcement, I go, oh great, theaters are alive and well. Like that's what I take from that, because I'm like, of course, if that announcement gets made, the knee-jerk reaction, everyone else is going to flood in that direction. You're going to see filmmakers who are prioritizing theatrical when theatricals are around again over streamers, and people are going to really start to think about who they work with and whether or not they care about the theatrical experience.
Yeah, I think what you guys are doing is important for our industry, and that I think we should all just be constantly having these conversations with each other so that we can all be better informed, because I think the more informed we are, the more comfortable we become.
Do you feel like having more conversations will be available in the future as well?
Happy to. You can bring Jim on next time.
Okay, we'll do a roundtable.
He's here, actually. He's been listening the whole time.
All right. Well, thanks, guys. We appreciate it. And congratulations.
Yes, congrats. It was so wonderful, and we loved it. So
awesome. Thank you.
Bye.
Demystified is a production of StudioFest. If you're ready to make a micro-budget feature, submit your film or screenplay now at filmfreeway.com/StudioFest. Demystified is a StudioFest production presented by Movie Maker. This episode was narrated and edited by me, Jake Bowen. It was conceived and recorded by Jess Jacklin, Charles Beal, and Jake Bowen. The theme song was composed by Patrick Patrikios. Other tracks used under Creative Commons licenses. To hear future episodes of Demystified, go to moviemaker.com or visit studiofest.com, where you can also learn more about StudioFest and subscribe to the show.